Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma Daf Vav. Today's daf is sponsored by Jeremy Booty in loving memory of Ari Chaim Ben Yardena Yehoshua V'Leah Dvora. And as usual, learning for our soldiers and the situation and the hostages. Okay. We will get started now with the bottom. No, actually, we're at the top of Vav. Okay, I want to just review what we did so far. Okay, let's just go back for a very, very quick review of what we've done in our Masechet so far. Let's go back to the first Mishna. Mainly what we did was we wanted to know, we wanted to understand Rav Papa's statement. When he said, what comes out of them is like that. But really, actually, I read yesterday, someone who suggested that it could be it was just because if you remember, instead of answering the question directly, first the Gemara went into to try to figure out what did he mean when he said some of the Toladot are like it and some of the Avot aren't. First they started with what are the Toladot of Regel, what are the Toladot of Shem, what's the source? And basically it was a way that the Gemara had an opportunity, they used Rav Papa's unclear statement as an opportunity to get to all the basics, which is, right, what are the four Avot Nizikin, where do we learn them in the Torah, and what are the Toladot that come out of them? Okay, so that was the first part where we went through basically all the different avot. We went through toladot, and then we had to figure out what Hever was, and then we tried to figure that out in connection with the line in the Mishna that said Shiur is not like Mav'eh is not like Shul, and then we had to figure out, well, depending on whether you say Mav'eh is person or Mav'eh is Shane, then what do you think Shiur is? And we went through all those different options. Then yesterday we dealt with these two lines of Shiur is not like Mav'eh is not like Shul, and they are not like each other. They are like each other, that they have Ruach Hayim as opposed to the fire, which doesn't have a life spirit in it. And then what was the purpose of those lines? We had two interpretations. One was that the purpose of those lines was to say that you couldn't have learned one from the other. Then we have Rava himself, even though they quoted Rava saying that, who said actually you could have learned them from the other. And then we ended with, well, if you could have learned them from the other, then why does the Torah specify each one separately? And the answer was, because each one has its own unique halachot, and then we went and listed basically what are the unique halachot about each of the avot of Nizikin. That got us to where we are right now. Now we're going to deal with the same line, with this, the next line in the Mishna. Today we're going to end up with the last two lines of the Mishna. So first sugya is going to be all about the next line, and the end of the sugya will be about the last line. So let's just read both lines of the Mishna, and then we'll go to our daf. The common denominator between all four avot nizikin, as opposed to comparing one is not like three, and three is not like one, and two are not like the third, and or the fourth, and this is not like that. Well, now they say there's a common denominator with all four of them. What are they? Shedarkan lahazik. Okay, these things typically do cause damage. Ushmiratan alecha, and you're responsible for this. The Gemara makes an assumption about this line. This line can't be just telling us. Okay, we'll get to the last line later. This line can't just be telling us some facts about, okay, let's find the least common denominator between these four things. The Gemara assumes, okay, on the first line of Daf Vav, the end of the line, what is this coming to include? This line saying the least common denominator is this, must be coming to say that there's something that we couldn't have learned, not from Shiur, not from Bor, not from Aven, not from Hevel, that would be on this list as well, that you'll be responsible for damages, but you can't actually learn it from any one of them. Okay, and then at Tzaddik you can only learn it from going with the least common denominator. Okay, that's what we're basically going to assume. And to answer this question, what cases is coming to include? We're going to have four different answers. I'm just going to put up for you for 1 second the study guide. I want you to see. I'm having trouble finding it here. Why is it not showing up? Here we go. 1 second. Having some difficulties. Maybe it got closed somehow. Okay, so fine. I'll figure this out in a minute. In the meantime, what we're going to see is we're going to have four different answers to this question. And what we're going to understand is that these, 1 second, let me actually just try to focus on this so I can get it up. We're going to have four answers, but it's going to be a long-winded explanation to how we're going to get to each of these answers. In other words, why we're going to have to prove, first of all, why you couldn't have learned it one from the other. Okay, why you couldn't have learned it, let's say, most of the time it's going to be actually from Bor. We could have learned it. And then we're going to say, well, if you can't learn it from there, then, in other words, why we couldn't have learned it from there. And then in the end, if you can't learn it from bor, well, then how do we learn it? And how do we learn it? From using this principle of the least common denominator. Okay, now I got it up. Let's share screen. Okay, so here's our chart. And it's not responding. Okay, so I'll give my computer some time to think. Here we go. Okay. So here's our chart. I'll make it a little bit bigger on the screen. Let's see if I can do that. No, it's not working. Okay, fine. Fix that later. So here's our chart. We have Abai, Rava, Rav Adbar, Ava, and Ravina, and they're each going to give an example. You can see by the fonts that the first two are just going to give an example that they're going to suggest. The second two, we're going to find an example in a Bright or a Tanaitic source and use that and say that must be our example. And then we're going to have, for each of these, the first option to understand what it is, and then say, oh, that doesn't work. And then the second option, we're going to say, oh, that doesn't work. And then there's going to be a conclusion. Okay, so let's start. And then as we go on, we'll see how this all works out. Okay, I'm just going to make it a little bigger now on my screen, and then it should work when I share screen. Okay, that's perfect. Okay, let's get back to our sugya. Okay. Amar Rabbi, Latuye avno sakino umasao shinicham berosh gago v'naflu beruach mitzuya v'yiziku. Abaye says, this is coming to include a case where, we talked about this before, I leave us a stone or a knife. Okay, I'll show you my knife cut I got this morning. I thought it was maybe connected to the sugya. Someone in my house left the knife facing up in the dishwasher, a sharp knife. So when I went to pull out the silverware, got a cut. So you can see how dangerous knives can be and what kind of damage they can cause. So now, at the time it happened, I wasn't sure why it happened. Now I realize when I started teaching, oh, sakin, knife, there you go, that's it. So a stone, a knife, or some sort of bundle, something, I left it on the top of my roof. Okay, as opposed to leaving it in the silverware compartment of the dishwasher in a way it could directly damage. In this case, I left it in a place where no one's really going there. But what happened? But they fell by a typical wind. We're going to talk a lot about this typical, atypical wind. Okay, what's the issue? Well, a typical wind, if a typical wind comes along and blows something off my roof, and it's something that could have blown in a typical way, and then it damages, well, it's my fault because I should have expected that was going to happen. Just like the person who put the knife in the silverware drawer in that way, right, in the silverware compartment, should have expected that damage would happen. So, hey, chidami. Well, what exactly is the case? Because if you remember, we talked about Evan Sakinu Masa. And to a certain extent, this is similar to bor because, right, it's like something that's left in the public domain. It's also a little similar to Aish because it moves, right, like a fire, and in moving, it could damage. So the Gemara is going to say, hey, chidami, what is the case? So the first suggestion is, if while it's moving, it damages, right? So the knife starts falling off my roof, and in falling, it stabs somebody on the way down. Hainu Aish, well, that is Aish, exactly Aish, okay? Because Mishna Aish tekoach acher mu'urav bo, umamoncha ushmirato alecha. What is Aish if not? There's some other, something operating behind the scenes that's moving it, which is the wind. Okay, the wind is blowing the fire. I made a fire in my house, but the fact that it got damaged yours is because of the wind. So there's some other power moving it. And mamoncha, it's yours. Now, this is a weird phrase. We had this actually earlier in the Masechet, and Tosfot there actually comments on that. It's not really, I don't own my fire. So the word mamoncha is used because that's the one used by the shore and in the other cases, but it's not exactly true because it's not really my possession. Okay, fire doesn't belong to me. I don't own a fire, but it's the same idea, which is I created it, so it's my responsibility. Ushmirato alecha, and I'm obligated to watch over it. So basically, haninami, this case also, koach acher mu'urav behem, umamoncha ushmirato alecha. So basically, if you say that the knife or whatever it is that I left on top of my roof does damage on the way down, then what's going to happen? That's basically fire. Okay, it's no different. So what are we trying to find? We're trying to find a case that Atzara Shaveh Shebehen is coming to include, and that's not this, because this is already a Tolada of fire. So you wouldn't need another line to include this case. Okay, option 2. Ela batar denayche. Let's assume it blew off my roof, and now it's sitting on the ground. Now, there's 2 options within this, and we're going to see this in all the cases, and this is a repeat of a sugya we saw earlier in the Masechet. Ida afkerenu, if I said once it fell off my roof, right, I have this knife, I like my knife, but it falls off my roof, blows into the middle of the public domain, and I say, oh, forget it. I'm not going to bother. I don't really want this knife anyway. So if I was mafkir it and I said, I don't want this anymore, well, then bein the Rab, bein the Shmuel, hainu bor. Remember, there's a big machloket, Rab and Shmuel, whether this is bor or whether it's shiur, because it is my, right? In other words, it's, sorry. In this case, there's no machloket. They're going to have an argument in the other case. But in this case, they both agree that it's all bor. Okay. In the case where I still own it and I leave it in the public domain, there's a debate. Is that like a shiur because it's my possession? Or is it like a bor because I've left it in the public domain and it's also, it doesn't have any life spirit to it. It's just an inanimate object. So there's a big machlok of Rabbi Shmuel about that. But if you're going to say, I was mafkir it and I said it's not mine anymore, well, both Rabbi Shmuel think that that's bor, in which case, right, why is it like bor? Mishna bor shakein tchilat asiyato lenezek. Bor from the first moment can damage. And it's mine. Again, it's not really mine. I don't own it anymore because I made it ownerless. But the point is, it was mine. I created it. And shmiratan alecha, and I'm supposed to watch it. Haninami, same thing with this object that falls off my roof, falls onto the floor. Tchilat asiyatan lenezek. Now, when did they become damaging? Not when I put them on my roof, but when they fell on the ground. When they fell in the public domain, from that moment, they can damage. And it was mine, right? Even though I disowned it now, but it was mine, and I'm supposed to watch it. So that doesn't work either, because then again, it's just bor. So either it hurts on the way down, it damages on the way down, right? The rock, let's say, falls on someone's head, smashes them. Well, that would be eish. If it falls on the floor and then someone trips over it and hurts themselves, well, that's bor, classic bor. If I was mafkir. Ela de lo afkirenu, if I kept ownership over it, well, the Shmuel, the Amar Kulami Ba'olamanu, to Shmuel, who says, we learn all means Evan Sakin or Masah that I left in Rishut Arabim. Well, like Hainu Bor, this is really one and the same. Okay, there's a big difference. There is a big difference, but right now they're trying to say it doesn't even seem like there's a difference, because if I leave it in Rishut Arabim and I say I don't want this anymore, or it falls off my roof, and I say I want it, or it falls off my roof and I say, well, it's mine and I'm going to go get it at some point. Either which way, it's all one and the same. Or whether I was mafkir, it's all really one and the same. To which the Gemara says, no. Really, we can go back to the case where I was mafkir and explain that this couldn't have been learned out from bor. Okay, so again, we have this item on my roof. Wind comes, blows it off my roof. And now someone gets damaged. While it's sitting on the ground. And I was mafkir, I said, I don't want this anymore. And we said, well, can't you learn this from bor? Well, lo damu the bor. It's going to be different from bor in one particular way. And you can already think about what the difference is. And we're going to do the exact same thing with all four cases. We're going to say it's really just the same as bor, or it's the same as something else. In the end, we're going to say, really, it's a case where it's in the public domain. I was mafkir it. Okay, I don't want it anymore. It's really like bor, but there's one big difference. Bor doesn't have a wind coming and causing it to damage. A bor is there because I dug it, and from the moment I dug it, it can damage, right? This, I put it on my roof. I didn't put it in the middle of the public domain. That's a big difference. That's not the same thing. Now, it doesn't mean I'm exempt. It just means that I can't learn that from bor because it's very different. So now, if you just have bor as an nizikin, as one of the main categories, and you said, could I learn this case from bor? The answer would be no, you can't. Why? Because I didn't put it there. This got there by some wind. Now, it's true, I should be expecting the wind to come, but it got here through some wind. Eish tochiach. Well, now come up with the combo of bor and fire. Okay, a pit and fire. So we're going to do this in two ways. The eish is going to prove what? The eish is going to prove that when ruach acher mu'urav bo, I made a fire in my house, but it spread to yours by the wind, I'm responsible. Likewise, when I put this on my roof and it falls into the public domain and somebody gets damaged by it and it got there because of some wind, well, I could be responsible for wind. The eish proves that that you can have a case that's like bor, but it doesn't, even if ruach acher mu'urav bo, it doesn't matter. You could still be obligated for that. And now you need the combination. Well, eish is different though, because eish is typically it moves and damages as it moves. A rock doesn't generally move, right? It's the way of a rock to move. Well, bor tochiach. Well, if you use the combination, so now we go with, this is why we have the least common denominator, and that's what that line is telling us, because Eish and bor each have something unique about them, which each one is different in some way from this case. Eish, right, has the ruach hacheru rabbo, which is just like this case, and bor has, this is, right, sitting on the ground and could damage. So it's like both of them. However, Eish has something unique that this doesn't have, which is darko lelechu lazik, right? It generally moves to damage. This doesn't generally move and damage, right? A rock, you wouldn't say, is the kind of thing that is dangerous for us, that could come and attack us. And bor has something, though, that Eish doesn't have, right? Bor, we're going to say, while bor doesn't have koch hamurabo, Eish does. And while Eish has darko lelechu lazik, bor doesn't. So now we basically have the common denominator. What's the least common denominator between them? Right, the Chazar Adin, that means the logic then prevails, which is each of these things, okay, that the fact that bor ein koch hachermu rabo and eish darko lelechu lazik can't be the issue that causes damages, because each one, right, exists in one but doesn't exist in the other. That means this isn't what causes one to be obligated. What does? The common denominator. That, right, remember what the Mishna says. Let's just read the words of the Mishna word per word. That hatzada shevesh behen shedarkan lahazik, they are dangerous things, right? Like a knife is dangerous, a stone in Rishut Rabim is dangerous, and shmiratan alecha, and you're obligated to watch them. It doesn't matter that some wind brought it over, if it was a typical wind, and it doesn't matter that it got there from this wind, or it doesn't matter that it's not moving to damage. In the end, it's dangerous, and in the end, it got there because of something you did, even if indirect, and therefore you're responsible. So that's Abaye who explains that this is the case that couldn't have been learned from bor by itself, couldn't have been learned from Eish by itself, but the combination of the two, and that's why that line is here. Okay, Rava Amar, la'atuye bor hamitgalgel b'raglei adam b'raglei behema. So Rava says, what are we talking about? A case where you put something down. Okay, now a bor hamitgalgel, that means a pit that rolls. Okay, you don't have a pit that rolls. But we already learned in the beginning when we talked about the toladot of bor, what's a tolada? A rock or a stone and a knife or something that you left on the ground and it could damage, like, right, take a knife, it's the most obvious. Now, what if I put down my knife or my rock? Maybe it's even more likely a rock, but it could happen to a knife as well. I put it down on a particular street in the middle of the public thoroughfare, and then it rolled, okay? Either b'raglei adam or b'raglei behema. A person was walking. We all know you walk on the street, not intentionally. If it was intentional, it could be things would be different. Maybe then they're responsible. But they're walking and it got moved. It got moved to the next block over. And now it damages there. Now imagine the scene. You get damaged by my knife that I put down. And you claim, you left your knife in the street. And I say, I didn't leave my knife in that street. I left it here. It wasn't my fault it got there. Okay, so now that's the case that I am going to be responsible according to this, but not because I could have learned it from one of the avot malachot, or the avot nizikim, because it's different. So again, hefidami, what's the case? Now here, it's not that it hits on the way, because there's really no on the way. I mean, theoretically, maybe you could as it was rolling, but something that rolls on the ground doesn't usually hurt in that way. So it's not, usually when it flies, you could have it hurting on the way. So they skip that option. But hechidami, they're going to basically go to, was I mafkir it? Did I make it ownerless or not? If I said, this is hefker, I don't want this anymore when I put it down on the street, well, both Rav and Shmuel think that's bor. I left a bor in the public domain. Mishna bor, in other words, again, it's just like bor because Mishna bor shekain tchilat asiyata lenezek ushmirato alecha. As soon as I put it down, it could damage, right? As soon as I dig my pit, it could damage, and I'm responsible to watch it. Haninami, this also, from the moment I put it down, it's true it didn't damage in this spot, but from the moment I put it down, it was open to damage someone. And shmiratan alecha, I should have watched it. Ella, right, again, I should have put up a barrier around and say, it's a dangerous object, or just picked it up, but okay. Ella, if I didn't make it hefker and I kept ownership of it, well, the Shmuel, Damar, Kulami, Behold, Abadu, Hainu Bor. Again, according to Shmuel, he says the Evan Sakinu Masa, all those we learn out from Bor, then it's basically a Toladav Bor. So again, either which way, okay, let's pull up the chart for a minute so you can see it again, charted out. Either which way, right? In the first case, it was either a tolada of Eish or a tolada of Bor. In our case, it's a tolada of Bor, okay? Either which way you look at it. So again, either I was mafkir it or lo ifkir. Okay, by the way, this is similar to the two possibilities that are in the second part of the chart on the first, for Abaye, these are the same two, but because it's missing the one that went on the way, so I separated them as to two over here. Okay. To which the Gemara answers, and I want you to see here, La'olam da'afkirenu is going to be the mantra of all these. In the end, they're going to say they're all a case where the person left it in the public domain, made it ownerless, and in the end, we're going to have to say, even though theoretically it should be like Bor, it's different from Bor in one particular way. And then the combination of this Av and that Av, right? It's going to be Bor and something. In the first case, it's Bor and fire. In the other three cases, it's going to be Bor and Shol. Okay, my animal does damages. The combination of the two are going to prove that you're liable, that you're responsible. So, Ela de l'afkerim, l'shmuel de amar kulana. Oh, sorry. La'olam de afkerim. So, really, I was mafkir, and this is the answer. V'lo damu lebor, but it's not similar to Bor. Why? Because ma lebor shekem asav garmulo. Tomar bahane she'em asav garmulo. Remember, I said if I put it down on this street and it interests you on the other street, I could say you come to get damages from me. I could say, what are you talking about? I didn't cause the damage to happen to you over there. If you walked on, right? If you walked on my street where I put it and you got injured, I understand I'm responsible. But in the end, my actions didn't cause it. Someone else kicked it along the way. So it's not me, it's them. Go find them. I don't know. But, and they can maybe claim they're not responsible. But I could claim I'm not responsible. It wasn't my masim that caused it. Well, Tomar Bahane, She'em Asav Garmula, right? So again, Bor, my masim did cause it. I dug a pit and then you fell into it. That's, of course, my responsibility. But in this case, where I put it somewhere and it moved to somewhere else, it's not my masim shegamulo, but Shiur yochiach. Why will Shiur prove it? Because is it my actions that caused the Shiur to gore someone else? Of course not. Maybe, again, my lack of actions by not watching it properly, but that's exactly the point. So in Shiur, you don't need, this is going to prove you don't need my actions to directly cause it in order to be responsible. And if you want to say, but wait, Shiur has a chumrah that doesn't exist in this case. Well, the Shiur generally, right? It moves and damages as it moves, right? It's kind of a typical thing to expect. Bor tochiach, right? But Bor will prove no, a Bor doesn't move. Okay, again, this is an animate object versus inanimate object. Sure, it's right, it can move and damage on the way. This, just sitting on the ground, well, so is a Bor. So, chazaradin lo rizeh ki rizeh. Again, we're going to have, this is not like this and this is not like that, meaning it can't be that ma'asav garmulo is a necessity, that my actions caused it because Shiur doesn't need it. And it can't be that it has to be something that moves and damages as it moves because Bor will prove that you don't need that. Therefore, the common denominator between the two, right? The least common denominator is, again, it could damage, whether it doesn't moving or it doesn't do while it's moving, it doesn't, right? Stationary, it doesn't make a difference. It damages. A knife is dangerous, right? As I proved this morning. So these things are dangerous things if I leave them in the middle of the street, and therefore, and I'm supposed to watch them. It's my responsibility. So I'm responsible. And again, that's learned not from one of the four avot malachot. That's learned from this line, hatzada shabeshaben, the least common denominator. Rav Adabar Avama, third case. And now it's going to get easier because basically we're just in the exact same framework as all the others. This is going to be a little more similar to the first because we're going to have an option where it moves and damages as it's moving or once it's stationed. Rav Adabar Avama la tuye hadatan kol elu shabu potkim bibotehen vigorfin ma'arotehen. Okay, this is a case where someone dumps out their waste. Okay, they have like a pipe where the waste is going and they dump it out, like an area where it's going, and they dump it all out onto the street. Or they take all the garbage that's in their cave. Okay, they have some sort of a cave and they throw it out into the public domain. Okay, so now what do we know about this? Well, in the Braita it says, in the summer you're not allowed to do this. But in the rainy season, you're allowed to do this. Now, why is this? So I've seen there's two different commentaries I saw. One is that in the winter, the streets are dirty. Imagine the streets in those days. There was rain going all the time. They were made of dirt. They weren't paved roads. So it was a total mess. Okay. The winter months were disgusting. The summer months, everything was clean. So, right, imagine your house. When your house is dirty and everybody leaves everything laying around, well, other people leave more things laying around because, oh, it's already mess. Who cares? We'll just add more mess to the mess. Now, as a mother, this isn't really the best thing. It's not really a good theory. Okay, because just because it's messy doesn't mean that you're allowed to make it more messy. Okay, it's a rule I try to keep in my house, right? Just because there's dishes in the sink doesn't mean that you can stick more dishes in the sink and just leave them there. But basically, what this is saying is, in the summer when it's all clean and it looks very nice, so you dump your stuff into the road, that's disgusting. In the winter, when it's a mess anyway, who cares? Okay, but a better option, especially if I like to go back to before, right? It's not exactly a great theory there to just add mess to mess. But in the winter months, the rain comes and the rain washes it all away. In the summer, and therefore it's not a big deal because it'll get washed away. In the summer months, it's a big deal because there's no rain and it's just going to stay there. That's probably a better explanation. Anyway, they're both good explanations. Now let's move on. The Braita says, even though you have permission to leave it there, but if what you dumped into the street then causes someone damage, well, then you have to pay. So on the one hand, you're allowed to do this, which already you can see why this is a little different from bor. You're not allowed to dig a pit in the middle of the road, but this is actually permitted in the winter months. But if it causes damages, you have to pay for the damages. So again, what's the case? We're going to go back to if while it's going, streaming into the street, it damages on the way, it's not exactly eish. It's more than eish because it's my koch. It's not that the wind did it. It's I did it. If I dump something on the street and you're right underneath, right? I'm at like the Haman story, right? Where they dump the garbage, right? If you get dumped on right away, well, that's me who caused it, not right. It's like shooting an arrow. Okay. I'm responsible. So that would be from Adam, basically. And Elabatar denieth if it after it landed again, and then you would need to learn it from this least common denominator. If it's after it already rests, hechidami, what's the case? Again, if I said, well, I don't really want this anymore, which chances are that was the situation here. Bein l'Rav, bein l'Shmuel, hainu bor. Well, that's bor because I left a stumbling block in the middle of the street. Mishna bor de tchilat asiyato lenezek. As soon as you put it there, it's could potentially damage. And it's yours, meaning your responsibility, and you're supposed to watch it. Haninami, same thing with this case. I dumped all my wastewater into the street. As soon as I put it there, it could potentially damage someone. And it's mine. I put it there, and therefore I'm responsible. If I kept it and I said, I want this as my own, which I can't imagine in this story, but let's say, again, Shmuel says, this we learn out from born, again, it falls into the category of born. So, to which the Gemara answers, we already know the answer, I did say, I don't want this anymore, made it ownerless, but it's not exactly like bor. Why not? For the reason we said in the beginning. Lo dam le bor, because ma le bor, sheken shelo bereshut. I'm not allowed to dig a pit in the middle of the street. But Tomar Bahane de Bereshut. But maybe you could say, how could I be responsible for this if I was allowed to dump my wastewater into the street? So how can you make me responsible if I'm permitted to do it, right? It's not like bor. Bor, I'm not allowed to dig a pit in the middle of the street without blocking it off and protecting it. But this one I was allowed to do. So maybe you would have made me responsible, and it can't be learned from bor. But Shiur yochiach. But Shiur will disprove it, because the Shiur, I'm allowed to let my Shiur go on the street, but I am responsible for damages it causes. So again, the combination. But you might say, right now we're at Amabet. You might say Shiur, but Shiur, its way is to damage as it's walking, moving, and this is not because it's now stationary. Well, bor tochiach, bor will prove that that's not the issue that causes you, because a bor also is stationary and it damages. And again, the combination of the two. So bor proves that even if it doesn't move and damage while it moves, and Shiur proves that even if it's allowed to be in the public domain, it still might mean that you're going to be responsible for damages it causes. Okay. Option 4. Ravina Amar la tuye hadatnan. Here's an interesting Mishna. Hakotel v'ha'ilan shenaflu l'reshut harabim v'ziku patur milashalem. I have a wall or a tree that fell into the public domain. Okay. Breaks all of a sudden and it damages. I'm exempt. But let's say the people in the municipality who go around checking things, they went around and they saw that my tree looked like it was going to fall down. They saw that my wall was not looking very good. And they said to me, you have 2 weeks to take this down. If within those 2 weeks it falls and damages, I'm exempt because I had 2 weeks to do it. But if it's after the 2 weeks are over, then I'm responsible. This sounds a lot like bor, right? It's an obstacle that causes damage in Reshut Rabbi. Well, hechidami. If I said, I don't really care about this tree, I don't want to own it anymore, I want to disown it, I want to disown my wall. Well, then basically I've left, right? The 2 weeks passed. I said, I don't want to have to do with this wall anymore. It's just a headache for me. I don't want to pay the money. Well, in the end, if it damages, it's my fault because that's like leaving something unowned in the public domain. And that's the same, right? It's bor. And then we can learn it directly from bor, which then means this wouldn't be the case. Mishna bor, and why? Why is it like bor? Because Mishna bor de heze komatsui. It's pretty common that it'll happen. Ushmirato alecha, and you're responsible for it. Hanenami. These also, once they warned you, your tree's about to fall, you better take care of it. Well, then it's pretty likely that damage will happen. And shmiratan alecha, you're responsible for this because you left this obstacle, it's an obstacle in the public domain, even if it's in your property, remember, but it's leaning over to the public domain. So you're responsible. If I didn't disown it, again, Shmuel says, even if I didn't disown it, it still is learned out from bor. So again, why do you need the least common denominator line to teach you this? Really, it was that I was mafkirat. I said, I don't want ownership over this. This is a big headache for me. Below dami labor, but it's different from bor. How is it different from bor? We keep saying this again. What does it mean for a bor? A bor, what's unique about it? As soon as I dig it, it's a problem. Now, when I built this wall, was it a hazard? No, not at all. It was holding up my, it was my fence to my house or whatever it was. It wasn't going to fall over. When I planted my tree, it was very solid. It wasn't going to fall over. I mean, at the beginning, it was nothing, but as it grows, right? It grows very strong. It's not exactly a hazard. So, Tomar Bahane, so you say, that's unique about bor. You can't learn this from bor because bor was from the moment I dug it, it was a hazard. And this was not. But shor yochiach. But again, a shor will prove this because a shor also, when it's born, right? It's not like you say, oh, this is going to damage tomorrow, right? It's not. It's not from the moment it's born, right? Just at a certain point, it might start damaging, but it's not like you look at an animal, say, oh, that's a hazard, right? That could create a problem. That could cause damage. On the other hand, but again, a shor, it's right. As it moves, it damages, and it's a moving object as opposed to bor, but bor tochiach v'chazaradin. And again, we have, if you say that this isn't like shor because this isn't moving, well, bor will prove that it doesn't have to move in order to cause damages. So the least common denominator between shor and bor will teach you this case. Okay, so now we have our 4 cases. It suggests we went through all different possibilities. What were we talking about? Every time we tried to say it sounds like you could really learn it from, right? In one case it was Aish, otherwise it was really all from bor. In the end, we say, no, you really couldn't have fully learned it from bor because it's got something that's a little different about it. But that something that's different is found either in fire or in an animal damaging. And therefore, from the least common denominator, we can get to this case. And then we now have 4 possible cases that could have been referred to in that line of the Mishna that said, well, the least common denominator is this, which seems to say anything that falls into that least common denominator, you'll be obligated for. Okay, now we're going to go to the last line of the Mishna. First, we're going to deal with the first few words, a very short something, and then we're going to get to the more meaty sugya, which actually we learned entirely word for word in Parak HaNizakin, if you remember, which is a parak in Gittin, where we started talking about Idi, Benonit, and Ziburit, the different types of land. And that's where we're going to get into that. Now, the exact same sugya was the big machloket Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. It's very hard to understand their opinions, and we're going to go through the same exact sugya there, where we try to figure out who holds what and what exactly do they hold. So the Mishnah says, Ukishehizik, and when you damage in one of these ways, Chav hamazik, Chav means you're obligated, like from Chayav. Chav hamazik l'shalem tashlumei nezek, the one who damages has to pay damages, b'meitav ha'aretz, from the best of his land. So now the Gemara starts off with the wording chav. It's a weird word. Chav hamazik, chayav hamazik mebayla. It should have said chayav. The Mishnah always talks about chayav, patul, right? We've seen that word a million times. Why did it say chav hamazik? So Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Hi, Tani Yerushalmihu, Detane Lishna Kalila. The people in Jerusalem like to use shortened language. So it must have been written by a Jerusalemite who used this short language of Hav. Okay, that's a pretty much side point. Now we're going to get to the more meaty sugya. L'shalem tashlumei nezek. For this is this big chart on the second part of the page. Okay, so we have two big charts for today. Tanu Rabbanan, metav sadeh or metav karmo yishalem. Now it says you pay from the best of your field, but whose field? Metav sadeh, from his field. Now his, it doesn't say who his means. So comes Rabbi Yishmael and says metav sadeh shel nizak umetav karmo shel nizak. It's the best field of the one whose field you damaged. Okay, we're going to have to understand exactly what this means and in what case, but that's divrei Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Akiva Omer, lo baha katuv, meaning I disagree with you about the way you read the pasuk, which even though he doesn't say it, but the commentaries are going to say with the explanations could be, he obviously must disagree and think it's not the best of the person who's damaged, but the best of the person who damages. Okay, so now, lo baha katuv ela ligvot lenizakin min ha'idit. Okay, she says that pasuk is coming to say that people who damage have to pay from the best of the land. He doesn't say whose land, and kavachomer lehekdesh, and all the more so if it's hekdesh. Okay, the last thing we're getting with today is a whole question: what does he mean kavachomer lehekdesh? Now I'm going to pull up the chart for a minute, and I'm going to show you now what our basic structure of what we're going to do from here till the end of the daf is going to be. So, sorry, my computer for some reason this morning is working very slowly. Okay, here we go. So now we have this machloket, okay, between the two of them, and we have the din of metav, okay, so we have what Rabbi Yishmael says, we have what Rabbi Akiva says, which we don't exactly understand. We're going to ask, first we're going to do the whole right side of the chart. We're going to ask a question on Rabbi Yishmael. We're going to answer an answer, it's not going to really work. Then we're going to give a different answer, okay, to really understand what Rabbi Yishmael is saying. Then we're going to say, what's his reason? And what's his source really? Where does he get it from? And then we're going to move to what is Rabbi Akiva's source. And then we're going to add another point where he actually has a bit of a different way of understanding things, like he might have a different law in a different case. And then we're going to go to Rabbi Akiva and we're going to ask a question on him, something that doesn't make sense for him. And then we're going to move to, some suggested possible answers, but we're actually not going to finish the answers. Okay, we're going to have two answers, and then we're going to reject both of them. Okay, that's the basic structure. So if you want to follow in there, you can. I'll pull it up in a few minutes when we get to something that I think the chart is very necessary for. So now we're going to try to understand what Rabbi Yishmael is talking about. Now, the first thing they think Rabbi Yishmael says when he says you have to pay from the best of the person who you damaged, the Gemara thinks that what he means is that if I damage a corner of your field, let's say, and it's poor property, I have to replace the same size, but in the best property that you own. Okay, so if you have one corner that's really bad land and one corner that's really good land, and I damaged your bad land, I have to pay for it with good land, okay, with something that's land of the quality that you have in your field that I didn't damage. To which the Gemara says that's absurd. Rabbi Yishmael, achal shmena v'shalem shmena. Okay, I understand if I ate good, here, shmena means fat, but not really fat. It means good, healthy land. Then I have to pay good, healthy land. But achal chusha, if I damage weak land, mishalem shmena, I don't have to pay more than what I damaged you. So it doesn't make any sense. So I'm Rabbi Bar Avin. So that's basically our question. So in order to respond to that question, we're going to have to understand Rabbi Yishmael a little differently, and we're going to have two attempts. The first one we'll reject. I'm Rabbi Bar Avin. What it must mean is, again, if this sounds familiar, we learned exactly this whole sugya. If it doesn't sound familiar, don't worry. This is why sugya repeats, so we get them better the second time. If you ate an area, okay, let's say you have a bunch of sections in your field, and my animal destroyed one area of your field. Achal doesn't mean eat, it means consumed, like I ruined it. And now we don't know, because now it's gone, so we don't remember anymore which part was better field, where better land, and which part was worse land. Then, in that case, maybe what it's telling you is, what Rabbi Yishmael is saying is, you have to pay from the best of the nizak, because you have to assume the worst, okay? And you're responsible. I'm a Rabbi. Rabbi says, what are you talking about? Right? What you're saying is basically, if I knew it was the lean land and it wasn't good land, I would only have to pay bad land, right? Well, now that we don't know which one, Hamotzi mechavero alav haraya. Well, there's a basic principle, which we're going to see all throughout Seder Nezikin, that if you want to get money from somebody else, the burden of proof is on you. So if I damage a property, and we don't know which part I damaged, whether it was bad land or better land, well, if you want to collect something of higher value, you're going to have to prove it. And at this point, we don't know. It's a safek. We're basically going to always go lenient in that case. So I'm only going to have to, if it's all a case of doubt, I don't have to pay you. Okay, I only have to pay you the lower amount. So that can't be what Rabbi Yishmael is talking about. So Ela Amrav Achabar Yaakov. Now we're going to get really what he's talking about. And here I'm going to pull up the chart. Kigon Shahaita Idit Nizak Kiziburit Demazik. It sounds like a little bit complicated. It's not actually so complicated. That's why I'll pull up. I made a little chart here. If the mazik, okay, that's me. I damaged your field. I have two types of land. I have good land and I have bad land. And you only have one type of land. Okay, we'll call it edit because it's the best that you have. Now, if your edit is only valued at my ziburit, your best land is equal to my worst land. That's when he says it goes by the nizak, meaning, right, there's two possibilities here. If I have to pay the best, I might have to pay for the best of my land, which is way better than your land. But if your best land is equal to my worst land, I can pay you with my worst land because that's what Rabbi Yishmael says. Meitav, the best of the sadeh of the nizak, and the best of the kerem of the vineyard of the nizak. So basically, if your land, your best land is equal to my worst land, I can pay you in the ziburit of mine because it's equal to your edit. Okay, because in the end, right, this is the case that Rabbi Yishmael thinks that you pay in the land based on the person who got damaged. Ubaha pligi Rabbi Yishmael. Sorry. And in this case, this is the machlokah between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Now remember, Rabbi Akiva wasn't really clear what he said. But what he's saying is, I disagree with you, Rabbi Yishmael. So it must be that even though he didn't say these words, but Rabbi Yishmael savar b'din nizak shaninan, then in a case like this, where again, I damaged your land and your best land is equal to my worst land, according to Rabbi Yishmael, I can pay with my worst land because you didn't even have land better than that. And Rabbi Akiva savar b'demazik shaninan. And Rabbi Akiva says, no, it goes by mine. I have better land. I have to pay by my best land. It's a penalty to me. There's no bearing, no relevance what your field was. Okay. My time of Rabbi Yishmael. And again, this has nothing to do with what field I damaged, which was the first thing we thought. It has to do with what kind of fields do you own in general? What's your best field? I don't have to pay you more than that, according to Rabbi Yishmael. According to Rabbi Akiva, of course I do. If I have better land, I have to pay better land. Now, my time of Rabbi Yishmael. Now we're going to get to the my time. What's the reason? Where did they get it from? So ne'emar sadeh lamata v'ne'emar sadeh lamala. The pasuk that we saw, ki yav'er ish sadeh o kerem. Okay, we're in Shemot chapter 22, verse 4. If someone destroys a sadeh or a kerem, what was the case? Shilachet bi'iro, he sends his animal. Remember, it would be b'stecher, and he eats. Remember, there was the shein and the regel reference in this pasuk. In a different field, okay, that's the one sadeh. Meitav sadeh u meitav karmo yishalem. You have to pay by the best of his field. Who's he in the sentence? Well, who was the he before? The field we were referring to was the field that you damaged. So therefore, Meitav Sadeu, the field that comes right after that, must also be his field. And that's why Rabbi Yishmael says it goes by the field of the person you damaged. So just like Sadeh Lamala, the first Sadeh is Sadeh HaAmor Lamala Dinizat, belongs to the person whose field you damaged, which is 100% clear. Af Sadeh HaAmor Lamata, the one used at the end of that pasuk, is Dinizat. For Rabbi Akiva, Meitav Sadeu Meitav Kamo Yishalem, Tehef to Kamma Shalem. Who's the subject of that part of the sentence? Meitav Sadeu Meitav Kamo Yishalem. You have to pay from the best of your field. That means, right, if in the case I discussed it was me, I have to pay for the best of my field. I'm the subject here. So therefore, Sadeu is referring to my field. For Rabbi Yishmael, now Rabbi Yishmael wants to say the following. I agree with you to a certain extent, Rabbi Akiva. Okay, he's going to say the following. Ahane Gzeira Shava v'ahane Kra. The Gzeira Shava, which is the Sadeh, works in the case that we just said. Ahane Gzeira Shava Kiddekamina. That's if, again, my field, my worst field was equal to your best field. You don't have any better fields than that. I could pay you for the worst. And that's when it says Sadeh Acher, and we go by your field. You want to say, Rabbi Akiva, that the simple reading of the pasuk is that the field is referring to the one who has to pay to my field. Well, ahane kra, I'll give you that there is a case where that would be the case, that I have to go up a level and pay for my best field. what would be the case? Okay, here's the second little chart on the page. Kigon de'itle lemazik idit vizibulit ve'idit lenizak. Okay, again, it sounds very hard to visualize this. That's why I put a chart. I, as the person who damaged, I have two fields. I have an idit and ziburit just like before. But the difference this time is that the idit, the nizak also only has one land, and we're going to call it the best because, right, relative to what he has, it's his best. But in this case, it's not like before that his best land was equal to my worst land. Ziburit de mazik lo shavya ki idit nizak. Okay, meaning my ziburit is not as good as the damaged person's idit. Meaning, right? So if you look at this chart, you can see the idit is in their good land is in between my best and my worst. Now, I obviously don't have Benoni land. If I had middle-sized land, it would be fine. It would be obvious I could pay the Benoni because, again, I only have to pay the best of your land, according to Rabbi Yishmael. But in this case, I don't have land at that level. I have land worse than it, and I have land better than it. Well, in that case, it's going to go by me. That's what the pasuk is explained. That's when we'll explain this pasuk. What he does is he plays on two sides. He says, basically, I'm going to play my opinion when I have something equal to your best, even though it's my worst. And I'm going to play Rabbi Akiva's card in the case where it's in between, right? Where I don't have anything as my worst is worse than your best, but my best is better than your best. Then I have to go up a level and pay by my best because I don't have land your value. So I can't go down. Okay, that's what we're going to read right now. So that's when the pasuk, the way you read it, works. I have to pay the best of mine. I can't say to him in that point, I can't say take my worst land because my worst land is not as good as his. Then I have to pay from the best of mine. That's Rabbi Yishmael's approach. So depending on the scenario, sometimes it'll be me, sometimes it'll be the one I damage. Rabbi Akiva Omer. Now we're going to go to Rabbi Akiva, and as I said, we're going to ask two questions about him. So what they want to know right now is what's the Mahi Kavachomer Lehekdesh? What's the case of Hekdesh? If there was an animal that belonged to the temple, right? They always have animals belonging for sacrifices. And my Shiur gores that one and damages it. Well, Shiur there are no damages for that because it has to be your friend's Shiur, not one that belongs to God. Ella, if you want to say it's something else, doesn't mean damages Hekdesh. There is no such thing. It must mean if I say I'm giving X amount of money to Hekdesh, to the temple, maybe it means the Gizbar can come, the treasurer, and say, I'm taking it from the best of your land. Well, that doesn't work because lo ye'el ba'al chov. He's just like a creditor coming to collect on a loan. And it's like a loan. And ba'al chov b'beinoni, and we know that a ba'al chov is beinoni, that we learned in Nizakin also, and not the idit. So it can't be that either. So we're left with a question right now. We'll have to deal with this tomorrow and better understand in general Rabbi Akiva's approach. So what we saw today, right? Basically, it broke down into these two big charts. Moments, what it's shaveh, which cases are coming to include. We have 4 options, and each one we went through the same back and forth, why it can't be learned from somewhere else and why it has to be learned from a least common denominator. And then we went to that small part about why chav and not chayav. And then we went to this machloka between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, and we're still in the middle of trying to figure out what are their approaches and where did they get it from. With that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a good day.